Man, I love Squaresoft. They make like the best games right now. I'm so glad I bought a PlayStation. This new game they came out with, Fencer Musashi, is so much better than that Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. Whoa, check this out. A PlayStation demo disc. It's a demo of Final Fantasy VIII. I love these things. I'll bet 23 years into the future exactly, we'll have so many demos, we won't know what to do with ourselves. Fencer Musashi is a little gem of a game that has never really received much attention. It's a great Zelda-like adventure that, if you can get access to it and you love PS1 era games, I encourage you to check it out. It's packed with anime tropes and a wonderful art style, plus I love the voice acting and the soundtrack. But I'm actually not going to be talking about Fencer Musashi today. I'm going to be talking about the demo of Final Fantasy VIII that it came with nearly a full year before its full release in the US. Fencer Musashi was released in North America on October 31st, 1998, and came bundled with a demo of Final Fantasy VIII, which did not see a full release until September 9th, 1999. That's right, 9/9/99 was not just the launch date of the Sega Dreamcast, it also saw the much anticipated sequel to Final Fantasy VII arrive. Squaresoft, known today as Square Enix, was one of many companies who liked to release demo discs to advertise upcoming releases. Since discs were super cheap to produce, packing a demo in with another game was a great way to sell other games to people who already had an interest since they already purchased one of your games. We saw Square do this with a demo of Xenogears coming with Parasite Eve, and Vagrant Story coming with demos of Chocobo Racing, Front Mission 3, and Threads of Fate. Getting back to Final Fantasy VII, the impact of this game cannot be understated. There were plenty of gamers who did not know Squaresoft or Final Fantasy existed, or who were even into RPGs until Final Fantasy VII. So the sequel was of course going to sell a ton. Why not use that to sell other games that Western audiences may not be so inclined to buy? Pack in a demo of a highly anticipated game with one that may not do so well in order to prop up the sales. It's a genius marketing tactic that we'll probably never see again since demos are all downloaded digitally these days, if they exist at all. Square was bringing a ton of games to the West that were primarily made for Japanese audiences because the late 90s saw a boon in anime interest worldwide. Games like Xenogears, Saga Frontier, and Final Fantasy Chronicles probably wouldn't have made their way to Western audiences because they didn't really fit with what we were used to playing. But since anime was becoming increasingly popular, they took more risks in the late 90s. What better way to look at this demo than to compare it to the final original game on PS1? The demo covers a very early mission in the game in a town called Dalit, and the differences will really make you wonder if they were still developing the story and characters right alongside the battle system. Now, a bit of warning, when I did the research on these differences, I had no idea that there were so many, and I didn't even realize that there were parts of the demo that made it into the final game that shouldn't have. So I'll be going through these fairly quick, unless they warrant a pause for us to take a closer look. When the demo boots, we get this start screen that uses music that reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy VII's main theme. Once we start, we're greeted with this text that gives a brief explanation of why the mission is needed. Once we see this really cool reflection of the moon on the water surface, we can hear a different music track than what is found in the final game. There's some radio chatter as the water ripples that's really hard to hear in the final game. One thing I always noticed was just how different Squall looked in this FMV sequence. I actually think the demo version fits his in-game model better, though I do prefer the younger look he has in the final version. You may also notice the demo has him wearing his normal outfit instead of his CD cadet uniform. Once we hit the beach, you'll notice Renoa is in your party and she's not playable until much later in the final game. Her presence here is really odd because she has no dialogue and no one even acknowledges her even being there. She replaces Cypher's and Selphie's role alongside Squall and Zell, who is also in his normal clothes and not in uniform. Dialogue differs throughout, so much so that characters act differently toward each other. This could mean that either characters were still being developed or the translators differed on their interpretations. There are no other CD candidates on the beach here. Names for things are different, like Cypher's head position on the team, or squad. There's no draw point for blind at the tower, you can't jump down the cliff near where you meet Selphie in the final game, and her introduction FMV is not here since she is missing altogether from the demo. During battles, the skybox is static in the demo whereas it rotates in the final game. When you meet up with Biggs and Wedge from the Galbadian forces, Biggs is identified as a lieutenant and not a major. I really like this part where Selphie is the messenger with the withdrawal order instead of a boring Dullet soldier like it is in the demo. The time you are given to make it back to the beach from the tower is only 15 minutes, whereas the final game gives you 30. The demo does contain this small animation of the tank getting back up. You have an additional choice in the final game not present in the demo when it comes to escaping the tank. You can duck into this restaurant, which will completely skip the FMV sequence that sees the tank coming to a bullet-ridden end. You should also notice the demo has a generic Dullet soldier atop the ship firing the machine gun instead of Quistis. There are a lot of smaller differences that don't warrant much attention, such as the slightly wider resolution on the demo, or color differences, or small graphical touches added in the final version. A few oddities from the demo's final FMV sequence actually made it into the final game that definitely do not belong. Selphie, despite her silhouette being completely different from Renoa's, still casts the same shadow in this scene on the beach. When the point of view switches to the tank's grainy black and white video, both Zell and Renoa can still be seen in their normal outfits. And as the warship pulls away from the shore, the Dullet soldier is still on the top instead of Quistis. From a gameplay perspective, there are even more differences. You only have access to a small number of spells that you have even this early in the final game. You cannot pull up the menu for any customization, you have far less HP, and there are no save points. You are unable to level up, and your party only has a single GF, Leviathan, which is not available in the final game until much later, meaning Quetzalcoatl, Shiva, and Ifrit are nowhere to be seen. When drawing magic, the max number of stocks you can get at once is capped at 3, and the cast command is placed above the stock command in the battle menu. Drawing in battle looks very different. The character animations are the same as when you cast a spell, the bubbles that represent the stock spells move in a different pattern, and the whole process takes much longer. It really feels like a beta version for drawing. As for limit breaks, Squall's is called Sea Sword instead of Renzo Kugan, and uses a different and more difficult to read timing gauge. He also finishes with Faded Circle instead of Rough Divide. Zell only has access to one of his finishers and cannot use the fight commands to keep his limit break going longer. And Renoa simply doesn't have a limit break, no matter how low her health gets. In the battle menu, the label GF has a period in it. Probably the most interesting part of this whole thing. The demo is missing this really nice cinematic camera viewpoint during this boss battle. Potions only restore 100 HP in the demo instead of 200, enemies and characters have higher stats in general. Squall's sword swipe at the beginning of battle is completely silent. There's no boss battle specific transition effect, and Mesmerize and Buell both can appear in random battles. Speaking of enemies, Elveret has a needle tail attack missing from the final version, and the tank, which is called XATM-082 in the demo, cannot be defeated and requires the player to run from it once it collapses. And finally, the boss theme, Force Your Way, is not present in the demo. Well, I had a lot of fun with this video, and I hope you enjoyed it too. A big shout out to FinalFantasy.fandom.com. Their page on this demo pointed out things that I hadn't even noticed before. If you want more videos covering specific games like maybe Brave Fencer Musashi, let me know in the comments. As always, Thanks for watching. This is Steven with Level 1 Sword, and I'll see you all later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to keep on top of the videos, definitely take a sec to subscribe. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon if you want to follow me across the internet. Level 1 Sword also has a weekly podcast, so give it a listen.